Hello, hello, and welcome to the Rippling Pages podcast. Good morning. How are we doing today? This is the podcast where we have a coffee with the world's most interesting writers to inspire your reading and your writing. The podcast where you can rely on writers to get real about writing, and it's all hosted by me, Liam Bishop. Delighted to have you here. That's what we're usually doing, but today this is one of my Ask the Host episodes where I go through some emails and questions that I get through different forms, and then basically you find out a little bit more about the podcast, behind the scenes look at the Rippling Pages. We get real about the art of podcasting, should we say. And so I've got some questions here that I'm going to go through, and yeah, we're going to see how it goes. So it's not planned really in any kind of way, shape or form. It's a little bit more loose, I guess we might call it. But I've just sat down, got the microphone out, got a pile of questions here, as you can hear, and I'm going to sit and go through them right now. So let's have a look. Who have we got here? The first one is from somebody called Pete. Not said where you live. It could be very well be one of my Patreon subscribers, actually. So Pete, how are we? And you've asked this simple question of what is the difference between a live reading and a recorded reading, remote reading. So I guess one way or another, every interview that I do is live in some form, whether it's remote over the internet or via when I've started doing live coffee conversations. So what you've heard on the Rippling Pages quite recently is I've started doing a lot more of these live coffee conversations, and this is where I'm literally in the room with the writer, having a coffee. That's what we're all about, having a coffee with the world's most interesting writers, but actually doing that live and in person. So there are obviously crucial differences between that and doing it remotely. We're in the room together with the writer, which is very nice and very exciting. But there's a few things to think about in setting that up compared to the remote one. So both, either way, shape or form, both of the interviews, both of the conversations, I prepare a lot. I read as much as I can of their current work, previous work, listen to interviews, read other kind of criticism they might have written, essays, read any interviews they've had, and really trying to build up a picture of that writer's world, the picture up of the writer, and just to understand their career trajectory, what might have changed in their work, what might have influenced their work. So that's the same. What is different is, though, we've got to set a few things up quite differently. So we have to arrange a room. Sometimes the ones that we've done it in a library. We've done this in in the publisher's office. We've also had one of our live conversations in a studio, so to speak. So that was a studio space that I set up. So there's a bit more liaising in that, and there's always people liaising between me and the writer, and the publicists or the agents, whoever it is. Most often the publishers, they are super, super helpful. I know I do this podcast on my own, but I couldn't do it without the help of people putting me in touch with writers and liaising between us. So these people really do deserve a shout out. So there's a bit more to think about there. Then obviously I've got to take down some equipment to help record it. So I just use remote microphones. I prefer just use, you see a lot of an aesthetic at the moment where where an interview, whether it's Louis Theroux, I don't know, or it's another book podcast, and they'll be sat with microphones. And I prefer, because I'm usually sort of traveling in transit, to use smaller remote Rode microphones. But then also I just prefer that kind of space where you've just not got these big bulky mics. So it's a different kind of aesthetic, I guess, as well. But who knows? We might look at that in the future. So we have to take some microphones. And then we have to take some extra kit, so we have to set up the camera, so we need some kind of tripod to do that. And obviously we've got our Rippling Pages merch to set up a bit of a studio. Those Rippling Pages mug you see without promote social media, they weren't that cheap, so I like to promote them where I can. But that's where we're having the coffee, with the world's most interesting writers. So when we're doing it remotely, it's usually we arrange a time and a place, and it means I can speak to often writers who are in different time zones. I'll send them a link to get online and how we do that, and then we record. So the crux of it, similar, but there are obviously different things to think about. I'd have to think about travel, obviously. I have to go down and see the writer. But either way, whatever it is, I hope that it's just exciting. It is a different space, but it's either way, whoever it is, whenever I'm doing it, whether it's remotely, live, it's exciting. Thanks for that, Pete. Lovely question. What have we got up next? So this is from Irina. Irina's from Manchester, and she's asked me what books do you recommend outside the podcast. So I do get this quite a lot, actually, and actually I always try and pick this out because it just gives me a chance to say about the books that I'm not talking about on the podcast. I've been reading Keith Ridgway's Duneen, which has been published by Fitzcarraldo Editions. Keith has written a lot of books, but this is my first time reading them, actually. And it's a very sort of absurd take on Dublin and London as two men who step into the bushes in a London park end up coming out in Dublin. And they arrive in this Dublin. There's no cars, there's no footpaths, moving footpaths. It's all incredibly strange, and I don't know how really Keith achieves that on the page, but it creates a very slightly kind of Flann O'Brien kookiness to it. But it's also just quite a really original way of looking at how we write about cities, and it's in a hymn to some of those brilliant writers who wrote about Dublin and moving through Dublin. Another one is published by Dead Ink, and this was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I'd been reading this before. I was actually reading this at the end of 2025, and hopefully I was hoping to get Alice on the show, and maybe we still will. But Alice Evelyn Yang, wrote this book called A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing, and it's a debut, and for a debut it's absolutely spectacular. It's about a woman whose father disappeared when she was about 14, but then he suddenly turns up on her door, and it's it's unrecognisably her father. But basically he starts to then talk about the history, or his story, his history, which goes back into ideas of the Cultural Revolution in China. And there's just some really wonderful images. It's got this kind of fantastical element to it, but this way that families do or don't speak about their histories, and when it's got this wider cultural history in relation to some of the things that happened in Maoist China. Perhaps we'll get Alice on the show. I've actually got a big stack of books here that I've not read, but I'm really looking forward to reading. So I've not read these, so you can't come at me if I didn't. Guillermo Sitch's huge The Coast of Everything, published by Sagan, the fantastic Sagan Meniscus Press. It's a massive book that's due to be released on Bloomsday, which gives you an idea of its scope. But you can hear it now. I'm going to ripple those pages. Comes with epigraphs from C.D. Rose, the experimental writer, Ronan Hession, and Guillermo Stitch wrote the kind of viral hit that was The Lake of Your Eyes. So I'm really excited to dive into this big one for sure. I've got M. John Harrison's new book. Again, this is a writer that sort of evaded me a little bit. His book is published by Serpent's Tail. He's got this fantastic back catalogue, and I'm definitely going to get into this. I'm looking forward to reading that. A writer who's publishing history that I really am long overdue in taking a look at. I've got a book here from Eloise Press, the wonderful publisher that publishes that's run by Ina, called Caesarea, and it's by the Swedish writer Hannah Nordenhook. And it's translated by the very renowned Swedish translator Saskia Vogel. It is about, in 19th century Sweden, when gynecology is an emerging discipline, and it's all about the ideas that it looks like of the female body, and representations of the female body. So it's I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that. It's got praise here from Jan Carson, Fernanda Melchor. I've got also a stack of Pyrini books here. You'll know that I'm a huge fan of Pyrini. Agnes Lidbecker's got another book out. I'd love to speak to Agnes. She was one of my live conversations. I've also got The Family by Sarah Messer. That's translated from the Spanish by Katie Whittemore. To my books preview, I'd like to also add to this. I've also got to mention Neil Griffith's new memoir, The Wrong Son, which was being published by Weather Glass Books. This has just come out. I've interviewed Neil before. He's a brilliant writer, a brilliant publisher, and he's then written this memoir, which is about his childhood, and it goes into some deep stuff. It describes a boy born into a family of grief and guilt, into a house already filled with ghosts where neither parent can see clearly what each has lost. And his memoir then talks about his life, about trying to become himself, as it describes it, draws on insights from D.W. Winnicott, Jacques Lacan. So that's going to be one that takes a little bit of time to read, but I'm really compelled to read it nevertheless. The cover of the proof I've got actually has got this brilliant image, I assume, which is Neil, by the grave of Marcel Proust. And then the other one is that I picked up it's another one about tracing fatherhood. Actually, it's by Raoul de Jong. It's published by Hope Road Publishing, and it's called Jaguar Man, and it's translated by John Ike from the Dutch. And essentially, this is Raoul tracing the history of his father, who was Surinamese. And it's all about the colonial legacies of Suriname in relation to the Netherlands. It's about his heritage, his Surinamese heritage. So yeah, those I've not read. So don't, as I said, don't come at me if you don't if you read them. But I'm really looking forward to get stuck into that for sure this summer. And then, obviously, this week it has been the Leeds Literature Festival, so I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about and showcasing that brilliant festival that's been happening around the city. It's my hometown, and we are a part of it this year, and delighted to be a part of it with my event with the writer Alice Hattrick on Sunday the 14th of June. Speak about that in a moment, but just to say that there's been some brilliant events throughout the week that I've been going out and about to. Jake Morris Campbell, the poet, he's talking about his memoir, though, Between the Salt and the Ash, a journey into the soul of Northumbria. And it basically all starts when Jake found this miner's lamp from his grandmother, and it launched him on this psychogeographic journey through Northumbria and the northeast. A place that I know quite well, some of it, and he goes through some places such as Lindisfarne, Holy Island, which we used to holiday as a child. And it goes into this history, and it's about the poetry of the place, the language of the place, the people of the place. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that after going to Jake's event. I went to something called Placard and Protest, which was hosted by the Rickard sisters. Very different for me, actually, about the graphic novel as a way of talking about protest. Last night was Small Distractions, a literary salon that's run by Rhiannon Kane. This is doing really well. It's a prose and poetry reading series for musicians, and I've had some brilliant musicians come along and read their work. And it's a literary salon held in Wax Bar, which is Leeds institution, shall we say. I think Rhiannon calls it the second best bar in Leeds after, of course, the Brudenell Social Club, which is a renowned music venue. And last night there was Stu Hennigan, who was headlining, and Stu led into some Niamh Cariad, the band Gloria, Green Gardens. So Stu, that was sold out. Last year it was sold out, and I think Rhiannon is taking Small Distractions to Latitude Fest. So brilliant work by Rhiannon, and it was really nice to go along and see what was happening last night. Then obviously this weekend, I'm going to be in conversation with Alice Hattrick about their new book, Fancy Work. I'm really excited for this. I've read this book now several times. I loved Ill Feelings, Alice's first book. The way Alice is writing non-fiction and how they're merging different forms of non-fiction. The personal narrative, the polemical narrative, the political narrative. This book is all about applying a queer historical lens to the life and work of Mae Morris and their gender non-conforming partner, MF. So the Morrises were a family of, William Morris started this arts and craft movement, and then Mae herself became a really prolific and influential artist in this space, and Alice explores this history for sort of evidence of Mae's relationship with MF, and it's a book that's filled with really sort of longing images of grief in some form and loss, but it's also a really beautiful book about love. So I'm really excited to speak to Alice about that. If you've read Ill Feelings, you know that it's about Alice's mother and their relationship with one another, the understanding of a diagnosis of a chronic illness. And Alice's mother is in this book as well, so I'm really interested to explore how this is about their relationship as well. So there's still the final tickets left for that. Get up in Leeds for that if you're around. The Bookish Tide, the LGBTQIA bookshop, indie bookshop based here in Leeds, are going to be selling books at the event, and it's up at Hyde Park Book Club at 1:30 p.m. We're down in the basement, so a nice big space, and it's going to be exciting. And obviously excited to bring Fitzcarraldo up to Leeds. So yeah, if you're around, do make sure that you come down for that. Okay, and then as a follow-on from this, I've got a question from one of my new Patreon subscribers. Woohoo! AJ. Thank you for this, AJ. It's great to have you on board. If you fancy being a Patreon member, check out the link in my show notes. There are two tiers. There is one where you basically get merch, you get shout outs, you get your own monthly personal podcast, which is a close read analysis. And then we have also got a cheaper tier, which is essentially where you can get a shout out on the show. So anything that you, if you want to be a member of that, then obviously you can ask me some questions as well, as we're doing now. Asia wants to know the origin story of the podcast and how much work it takes to put an episode together. So we got a little bit of a hint of that in my answer about the live episode. Lots of reading, and then lots of writing. And I guess actually to extend that, when you edit the podcast, there's not much that changes really in the live. You've got to do a bit of touching up in here and there, but editing usually takes me about a day or so to pull it together. Sometimes a bit longer, depending on how much content we've got, depending on how much editing it needs. And then you've got to put it onto, you've got to make sure that it's the right format for all the different podcast platforms, and then you've got to write your show notes, and then you've got to put the chapters in, so you've got to put the timestamps, and then you've got to load it up, schedule it for when you want to launch it. Then you've got to do the graphics, you've got to do my socials. You see the socials clips, you've got to put them together. That takes quite a bit of time as well. Notify everyone, notify the publicists, the writers that their episode is online. So I add all that up. I don't know. But it does take a bit of time, as you can imagine. And I guess the origins of it were, the idea of the Rippling Pages comes from this sense of the ripples, obviously the ripples of a book, but it's the ripples that we make as people, as writers, as characters. And when I started this, I'm a critic. I'm just interested in good writing, what I think is good writing. And I think indie presses do a lot of that. I think mainstream publishers do a lot of that. But the angle of it has been indie presses. Not exclusively, but it's about trying to identify those emergent and exciting voices that are just doing really interesting things with words. So it was the pandemic, and I was at home, and I was obviously working, and I was still writing, and I wanted to keep contributing to that conversation about books, and I really wanted to showcase people that were publishing at the time and indie presses that were publishing at the time. And I felt like it was really important to try and influence that conversation and provide a platform. So curated this idea of the Rippling Pages. It started off actually as a collaboration with a mental health and arts organisation. And then I developed the Rippling Pages as the brand. And that's where it started. I was having conversations in my spare bedroom with writers. And I still am in some form or other. My studio is at home now. Obviously, we're going out and about to venues around the country. But it came from purely me and wanting to speak to writers, and I just believe the values of the project are that it doesn't really matter who you are. If you're doing something good, then your influence will be felt. Perhaps it might make small ripples at first, but by being involved with the podcast, those ripples have the chance to grow. And the ripples that you bring in as a writer, the influence that you have, when we get sort of people with more established track records in writing, that brings some of the more emerging voices into a conversation with them. And I just felt also that in our age that there is everyone, there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I think that it's really important that we still focus on the writing. We still focus on the books. And so, if you're out there and you're listening and I've got an idea for something, I care about books, whether it's writing, whether it's podcasting, whether it's reviewing, even reviewing, I started from just, I want to write about books, I want to develop my craft, I want to learn, and just continually, steadily chipping away. And this is what I've done with the podcast, to be fair. And if you're sat there wondering, how do I do this? You've just got to go out and do it. Find ways, speak to people, believe in yourself. It's a cliche, but you've just got to believe in yourself that you can do it, and just learn along the way. And you can bring people on that journey. I've learned so much. The craftsmanship of the podcast has changed. My craftsmanship of asking questions has changed, and I've developed, and I've learned things along the way, even though, still think I was pretty good at it at the start. And that's probably what you are as well. You're probably pretty good at it. So just believe in yourself and just start doing it. And it's all about, for me, it's always about just contributing to that conversation and bringing books to you that I think deserve to be brought to you. It's all crafted, it's all created by me, for me and my mind and my taste, and I'm helping curate your taste as well. So when I say, this is a podcast where writers get real about writing, I truly do believe that, because I am sat here generating the content. It's me, it's the writer, and we're just getting into it. What makes writing what it is? Okay, so yeah, that's it. Well, I enjoyed that one. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. As I said, if you're around, just get the final tickets for my the live Rippling Pages episode with Alice Hattrick. And you think of all the things we've just spoken about there, to think that started from here. Now we're headlining festivals with live recordings. It's a beautiful thing, folks. I love it. So I appreciate you being here on this journey. I appreciate where we're going. And we're going further and farther in the future as well. There'll be more events. There'll be more live events. And thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it from wherever you're listening. I've said this before, and I think I'm going to repeat myself, but I've said this before. I have such a wonderful life. We don't make loads of money, and even as you can hear the writers say, it's not a lucrative business. But I have the opportunity to meet so many interesting people and artists and writers and listeners as well, and it is the greatest privilege. So I do genuinely appreciate you being here, each and every single one of you. Okay, I think we should leave it there. But as I always say at the end of every episode to the writer, thank you so much for joining me. And this one goes out to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Rippling Pages. But for now, until next time.